The pain shooting through Sarah Mitchell's arm was nothing compared to the terror clawing at her chest as she huddled in the corner of the bathroom, her phone clutched in her trembling left hand. Blood trickled from her split lip, and she could already feel her right eye swelling shut. Through the thin door she could hear Derek pacing in the bedroom, his heavy footsteps punctuated by muttered curses. "Sarah," he called out, his voice deceptively calm now. "Baby, come out. I'm sorry. You know I didn't mean it." She'd heard those words 100 times before, but tonight was different. Tonight he'd gone too far. Her right arm hung at an unnatural angle, and every shallow breath sent waves of agony through her ribs. She needed help. She needed to get out. With shaking fingers, she pulled up her mom's contact and typed with her left thumb, each letter a struggle through her tears and the pain fogging her brain. "Mom, please help. Derek broke my arm. I'm scared. He won't let me leave." She hit send and waited, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. The bathroom door handle rattled. "Sarah, don't make this worse. Open the door. We can talk about this." Her phone buzzed. Relief flooded through her until she read the response. "Who is this? You have the wrong number." Sarah's stomach dropped. No. She pulled up the message thread and felt ice water replace the blood in her veins. In her panic, she'd texted a number she didn't recognize. It wasn't even in her contacts. She must have mistyped when her vision blurred from the swelling around her eye. Before she could process this disaster, another message appeared. "Where are you? Are you safe right now?" The voice on the other side of the door changed. Derek's false sweetness evaporated. "I'm going to count to 3, Sarah. Then I'm breaking this door down." Her fingers flew across the screen. "Locked in bathroom. 2247 Riverside Apartments, Unit 15. Please don't call police. He'll kill me if cops show up. He's connected." It was true. Derek worked for someone important, someone dangerous. He'd made sure she knew that any attempt to go to the authorities would end badly for her. His boss owned half the police force, or so he claimed. 1. Another message. "I'm sending someone. Do not open that door. Hold on. 2. Sarah pressed herself further into the corner, cradling her broken arm. Who had she just texted? What had she done? But did it even matter? She was going to die here tonight, in this bathroom, at the hands of a man who'd promised to love her forever. 3. The door exploded inward, the flimsy lock no match for Derek's shoulder. He filled the doorway, his face flushed with rage, and something else, something that looked almost like panic. "Who did you text?" he demanded, stalking toward her. "Who did you fucking text, Sarah?" She couldn't answer, couldn't move. He grabbed her broken arm and she screamed, a raw sound that tore from her throat. "I asked you a question." "Wrong number," she gasped out between sobs. "I texted the wrong number, I swear. Please, Derek, please." He released her arm and she crumpled, bile rising in her throat from the pain. He was pacing again, running his hands through his hair, and she realized with a start that he looked afraid. "You stupid bitch. You have no idea what you've done. If anyone finds out about this, if my boss hears that I can't even control my own girlfriend..." He didn't finish the sentence, just kicked the bathroom cabinet hard enough to splinter the wood. Through the ringing in her ears, Sarah heard something else. A car door slamming. Footsteps on the stairs outside, multiple sets, moving fast. Derek heard it too. His head snapped toward the apartment door. "Who did you call?" he asked again, but this time his voice shook. "I told you, wrong number. I don't..." The front door didn't just open. It was removed from its hinges with a single, devastating kick that echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. Sarah heard Derek make a sound she'd never heard from him before, a whimper of pure fear. Heavy footsteps entered the apartment. Not running, just walking with the confidence of someone who had nothing to fear. "Where is she?" The voice was deep, cold, and carried an accent Sarah couldn't quite place. Eastern European, maybe. Each word was measured, controlled, like the man speaking them was holding back something violent. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but this is my apartment, and you need to—" The sound of Derek's protest being cut off was meaty and final. Sarah heard him hit the wall, heard the breath whoosh from his lungs. "I will ask one more time. Where is she?" "Bathroom," Derek wheezed. Sarah tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She managed to pull herself up using the sink just as a man appeared in the bathroom doorway. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that seemed to fill the entire frame. Dark hair, steel gray eyes, and a face that looked like it had been carved from marble by someone who understood that beauty and danger weren't mutually exclusive. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sarah's car, and despite the violence that had just occurred, not a hair was out of place. Those gray eyes swept over her, cataloging every injury with a precision that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when he saw her arm. "You sent the message," he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, unable to find her voice. He turned his head slightly, not taking his eyes off her. "Victor, get her out of here. Take her to Dr. Petrov. Tell him I want a full examination and documentation of every injury." A second man appeared, younger but no less intimidating, with blonde hair and the same military bearing. He moved toward Sarah carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. "Miss, I'm going to help you walk. Is that all right?" She nodded again, and Victor's hand closed gently around her good arm, supporting her weight as she stumbled forward. As they passed through the doorway, Sarah saw Derek pressed against the wall, held there by the dark-haired man's hand around his throat. Derek's feet were barely touching the ground. "Please," Derek gasped, his face turning purple. "I didn't know, I swear. I didn't know who she was." "She's nobody to you," the man said quietly. "She was never anything to you. Do you understand?" Sarah wanted to keep watching, wanted to see Derek get what he deserved, but Victor was guiding her out of the apartment with surprising gentleness. She caught a glimpse of 2 more men in dark suits standing guard in the hallway before Victor led her down the stairs. A black SUV idled at the curb, its windows tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. Victor opened the back door and helped her inside, where soft leather seats and climate-controlled air wrapped around her like a blanket. He slid in beside her, and the vehicle pulled away from the curb smoothly, quietly. "Who was that?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you people?" Victor's expression softened slightly. "That was Alexei Volkov, and you just became the luckiest wrong number in history." The name meant nothing to Sarah, but the way Victor said it, with a mixture of respect and wariness, told her everything she needed to know. She'd texted someone important, someone dangerous, someone who just saved her life. The rest of the drive passed in a blur of pain and shock. Victor made a phone call in a language Sarah didn't understand, his tone respectful, almost deferential. When they pulled up to what looked like a private medical clinic in an upscale part of the city Sarah rarely visited, she tried to protest. "I can't afford this. I don't have insurance that would cover—" "It's already handled," Victor said, helping her out of the car. "Mr. Volkov's orders." Dr. Petrov turned out to be a silver-haired man with kind eyes and gentle hands who examined her with thorough professionalism. He documented everything with photographs and detailed notes, explaining each injury as he catalogued it. Broken radius and ulna in her right arm. 3 cracked ribs. Severe bruising across her torso and face. Split lip. Mild concussion. "You're very lucky," he said as he set her arm in a cast. "Another few pounds of pressure, and these ribs could have punctured a lung." Lucky. Everyone kept using that word. Sarah didn't feel lucky. She felt broken and terrified, and utterly lost. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Dr. Petrov finally finished. Victor had waited in the hallway the entire time, and now he stood as she emerged, his expression unreadable. "There's an apartment prepared for you," he said. "Secure building, doorman. Everything you need." You'll stay there until Mr. Volkov decides what to do about your situation. I can't accept that. I don't even know him. He doesn't owe me anything. Victor's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. You texted him for help. He doesn't ignore such things. Come. You need rest. Too exhausted to argue, Sarah let him lead her back to the SUV. The apartment building they pulled up to 20 minutes later was the kind of place she'd only seen in magazines. The doorman greeted Victor by name and didn't even blink at Sarah's battered appearance. The apartment itself was on the 15th floor, spacious and elegantly furnished with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city. Victor showed her the bedroom, the bathroom stocked with toiletries, the kitchen with a fully stocked refrigerator. There are clothes in your size in the closet, he said. Basics, but they should fit. My number is programmed into that phone on the counter. You need anything, you call. Day or night. Understood? Why is he doing this? Sarah asked. I'm nobody. Just some random person who texted the wrong number. Victor studied her for a long moment. Mr. Volkov has very particular views about men who hurt women, especially women who ask him for protection, even accidentally. Get some sleep, Miss Mitchell. Things will be clearer in the morning. He left, and Sarah was alone in an apartment that probably cost more per month than she made in a year, with a broken arm and a head full of questions that had no answers. She should have been terrified. She should have called someone, her real mom, a friend, anyone. But instead, she found herself thinking about those gray eyes, the controlled fury in that deep voice, the way Alexei Volkov had looked at her like she mattered. She fell asleep on top of the covers, still in Dr. Petrov's borrowed scrubs, and dreamed of a man who broke down doors. Morning came with sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover. Sarah woke disoriented, every muscle screaming in protest as she tried to sit up. For a moment, she thought the previous night had been some kind of fever dream. Then she saw the cast on her arm and knew it was all real. She managed to shower one-handed, careful to keep the cast dry, and found the clothes Victor had mentioned. Soft joggers, comfortable t-shirts, even undergarments still in their packaging, all in her exact size. It should have been creepy, but somehow it just felt thorough. She was attempting to make coffee one-handed when her temporary phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. How are you feeling? Sarah stared at it. The number wasn't Victor's. She typed back carefully. Who is this? Alexei. Did you sleep? Her heart did something complicated in her chest. The man who'd saved her, who'd terrified Derek into silence, was asking if she'd slept well. Yes, thank you, for everything. I don't know how to repay you. The response came quickly. You don't. I'm handling the Derek situation today. You're safe. That's all that matters. What does handling mean? A longer pause this time. Better you don't know the details, but he won't bother you again. Ever. I promise you that. Sarah should have been disturbed by the implications. Instead, she felt relief so profound it made her knees weak. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, staring at the phone. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you come yourself, last night? You could have sent Victor or anyone else. Why you? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. When the response came, it was shorter than she expected. I needed to see you were real. Before Sarah could process that, before she could even begin to formulate a response, another message arrived. I have meetings today. Victor will check on you this afternoon. Rest. Heal. We'll talk soon. And that was it. Sarah sat in the expensive apartment, drinking coffee she'd barely managed to make, and tried to understand what was happening to her life. The next few days passed in a strange sort of limbo. Victor checked on her daily, bringing groceries and asking if she needed anything. Dr. Petrov made a house call to check her injuries and proclaimed her healing well. Sarah called her job and quit, unable to stomach the thought of going back to the dental office where Derek had first charmed her 2 years ago. She texted with Alexei every day. Never long conversations, but consistent. He'd ask how she was feeling, if she needed anything. Sometimes he'd send a simple good morning that made her smile despite everything. On the 4th day, he asked if he could visit. Sarah spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to make herself presentable with one working arm. The bruises on her face had faded from purple-black to a mottled yellow-green, and the swelling around her eye had gone down enough that she could open it fully. She'd washed her hair and managed to dry it into something that didn't look like a bird's nest. When the knock came at 7 that evening, her heart was racing. Alexei stood in the hallway, holding a bag from what Sarah recognized as one of the city's most expensive restaurants. He'd traded the suit for dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. Those eyes swept over her face with the same careful attention he'd shown that first night. "You look better," he said. "I look like I went 10 rounds with a prizefighter and lost." The corner of his mouth twitched. "You look alive. That's what matters. May I come in?" Sarah stepped back and he entered, moving through the space with easy familiarity. Of course he knew this apartment. He'd arranged for her to stay here. "I brought dinner," he said, setting the bag on the kitchen counter. "Nothing too heavy. Dr. Petrov said you should eat carefully for a few more days." They ate at the small dining table by the windows, the city spreading out below them like a carpet of lights. Alexei had brought some kind of delicate fish with roasted vegetables, and Sarah was surprised to find she had an appetite. "Victor said you quit your job," Alexei said after a while. "I couldn't go back there. Derek knew where I worked, and I couldn't." "Understandable. What did you do?" "Dental hygienist. Not exactly glamorous, but I was good at it." "What would you do if you could do anything?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. "I used to want to be a teacher, elementary school. I love kids, love watching them learn new things. But I never finished my degree. Life got in the way." Alexei nodded slowly. "Life? Is that what we're calling him?" Sarah's throat tightened. Derek was charming at first, attentive, sweet. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already isolated from my friends, my family. He'd convinced me they didn't understand us, that we were better off alone together. Classic abuser tactics. You sound like you know about this stuff. I make it my business to know about many things. He paused, studying her. Derek worked for the Russo family, mid-level enforcer, thought he was more important than he was. He liked to tell you his boss owned the city, yes? Sarah nodded. "Marco Russo owns 3 restaurants, 2 dry cleaners, and a construction company. He's what we call a tourist. Plays at being connected, pays protection money to the real powers, and lives off the reputation of his grandfather, who actually was somebody. Derek was lying to keep you scared." The relief that flooded through Sarah was almost painful. "So I could have gone to the police?" "You could have, but I'm glad you didn't." "Why?" Alexei leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Because then I wouldn't have met you." The air in the apartment seemed to thicken. Sarah's pulse hammered in her throat. "You keep saying things like that. I don't understand. You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to." "I'm nobody. A dental hygienist who texted the wrong number and got lucky. You're a woman who, despite being terrified and injured, still had the courage to ask for help. Do you know how rare that is? Most people in your situation would have given up, would have stayed quiet. You fought back the only way you could." "I was desperate." "You were brave." He said it with such certainty that Sarah almost believed him. She looked down at her plate, unable to meet those intense gray eyes. "Who are you really, Alexei? And don't tell me you're just a businessman who doesn't like bullies." "But that's exactly what I am." "Victor called you Mr. Volkov, like you're royalty. People are terrified of you. Derek looked like he was going to pass out when you showed up. You have doctors on call and safe houses and people who follow your orders without question. That's not just a businessman." Alexei was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "My family has been in this city for 3 generations. We have..." Interests. Varied interests. Some more legitimate than others. I inherited the responsibility of managing those interests when my father died. You're telling me you're some kind of crime boss. I'm telling you I'm a man who takes care of his people and his responsibilities. The methods aren't always pretty, but they're effective. Sarah should have been horrified, should have asked him to leave, should have run. Instead, she asked, "What happened to Derek?" "He's alive, if that's what you're asking. Alive and aware that if he ever speaks your name, thinks about you, or comes within 100 miles of you, he'll disappear in a way that ensures he's never found." I also had a conversation with Marco Russo, explaining that if Derek remains employed by the Russo family, I'll take it as a personal insult. So Derek's jobless and terrified. Yes. Good. Alexei's smile was sharp and approving. Good indeed. They talked until nearly midnight. Alexei asked about her childhood, her family, her dreams before Derek had systematically crushed them all. He listened like every word mattered, like she was the most interesting person he'd ever met. When he finally stood to leave, Sarah felt a pang of disappointment. "Thank you," she said as she walked him to the door. "For dinner, for listening, for everything." "You don't need to thank me, Sarah." "I do, though. You saved my life." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm against her cheek. "Then let me keep doing it." After he left, Sarah stood by the door for a long time, her hand pressed to the spot where he'd touched her, and tried to understand how her life had turned into something from a novel. The weeks that followed developed a pattern. Alexei visited 3 or 4 times a week, always bringing food or books, or once, absurdly, a ridiculous bouquet of flowers that barely fit through the door. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Moscow, moving to America as a teenager, learning to navigate a world where his last name meant something dangerous. She told him about her small-town childhood, her alcoholic father, her mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He never pushed, never tried to touch her beyond those brief, careful moments when his hand would brush hers, or he'd tuck her hair back, like he understood that she needed time to remember what it felt like to be around a man who didn't want to hurt her. "Come work for me," he said one evening, about 6 weeks after that first night. They were sitting on the couch, Sarah's feet tucked under her, Alexei's arms stretched along the back cushions. Her cast had come off the week before, and she'd been flexing her hand constantly, marveling at the freedom. "What?" "I own a community center in Riverside. We run after-school programs for kids whose parents work late. We need someone to coordinate the education component, plan activities, help with homework, that sort of thing. It's not teaching, but it's close." Sarah stared at him. "You own a community center?" "Among other things. Don't look so surprised. Even criminals can be civic-minded." "You just called yourself a criminal. I called myself civic-minded. You inferred the rest." His eyes gleamed with humor. "Will you at least think about it?" "Why me? You could hire someone with actual credentials." "I could. But I want someone who understands what it's like to need help and not know where to find it. Someone who's fought to survive and come out stronger. Someone I trust." The last part made her breath catch. "You trust me?" "With significantly more than a community center, as it happens." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. At some point in the last 6 weeks, Alexei Volkov had become the best part of her day. She looked forward to his messages, his visits, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and worth protecting. It terrified her, this feeling blooming in her chest, but she couldn't seem to stop it. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Yeah?" "Yeah. But I have conditions." "Name them." "I need to do this on my own merit. If I'm bad at it, you fire me. No special treatment because we're whatever we are." "Friends," Alexei supplied. "At minimum, we're friends." "Friends," Sarah repeated, testing the word. It felt inadequate for what was growing between them, but it was a start. And I pay rent on this apartment. No. Alexei. Absolutely not. This apartment is yours for as long as you want it. Rent-free. Non-negotiable. That's not fair. You can't just give me a place to live. I can, and I am. Sarah, I have 14 properties across the city. This apartment was sitting empty before you moved in. You're doing me a favor by occupying it. She wanted to argue, but the look on his face told her she'd lose this battle. Fine, but I'm buying groceries. If it makes you happy. It does. Then buy groceries. He shifted closer, his expression growing serious. I need to tell you something. Sarah's stomach tightened. That sounds ominous. Not ominous. Just honest. I'm not a good man, Sarah. I've done things that would make you look at me differently if you knew the details. My world is dangerous, complicated, and morally gray on the best days. If you work for me, if you're in my life, there are risks. What kind of risks? People who want to hurt me might try to get to me through you. Business rivals, ambitious underlings, law enforcement. You'd need security sometimes. Victor, or someone like him. Are you trying to talk me out of this? I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're walking into, because once you're in my world, truly in it, there's no going back to normal. People will know you're under my protection. They'll treat you differently. Your life will change. Sarah thought about her life before. The isolation, the fear, the way she'd become smaller and smaller, trying not to set Derek off. Then she thought about the last 6 weeks. Learning to laugh again, feeling safe, looking forward to tomorrow instead of dreading it. My life already changed, she said quietly. The night I texted the wrong number. Maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Alexei studied her face like he was memorizing it. You're sure? I'm terrified, but I'm sure. He reached out and took her hand, the first time he'd really held it, his fingers lacing through hers. His touch was warm, solid, real. Then I promise you this, no one will ever hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing. Sarah believed him. The community center was exactly the kind of place Sarah had always dreamed of working. Bright, clean, full of energy and hope. The kids ranged from 6 to 12, a chaotic mix of personalities and backgrounds. They tested her boundaries the first week, the way kids always did with someone new. By the second week, they'd accepted her. By the third, they loved her. Alexei stopped by occasionally, always creating a stir. The kids called him Mr. V and showed off their projects, completely unafraid of this man who made hardened criminals nervous. Sarah watched him crouch down to admire a 7-year-old's finger painting, offering serious critique like it was a masterpiece, and felt something in her chest crack open. She was falling in love with him. The realization came one evening 3 months after that first night. They were in his car, Victor driving, heading to dinner at a restaurant Alexei promised would change her life. Sarah was laughing at something ridiculous he'd said, and she turned to find him watching her with an expression so tender, it stopped her breath. What? She asked. Nothing. Everything. You're beautiful when you laugh. Alexei, I know. Too soon. Too fast. We're just friends. He said it like the word tasted bitter. But I need you to know, Sarah. I need you to understand that this, you and me, it's not nothing to me. It's never been nothing. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then what is it? Everything, he said simply. You're everything. The restaurant disappeared. Victor disappeared. The whole world narrowed to the back seat of this car and the man looking at her like she held his heart in her hands. I'm falling in love with you, Sarah whispered. I know I shouldn't. I know it's crazy. It's only been 3 months and you're you and I'm just... He kissed her. It was nothing like Derek's kisses had been, demanding and controlling. Alexei kissed her like she was precious, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment, and now that it was here, he wanted to savor every second. His hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness, his thumb stroking her cheekbone, and Sarah melted into him like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexei pressed his forehead to hers. "You're not just anything," he said fiercely. "You're the woman who brought me to my knees with a wrong number text. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You're mine, if you'll have me." "Yours," Sarah breathed. "Yes, God, yes." They never made it to the restaurant. Victor, bless him, simply drove in circles until Alexei gave him an address. They ended up at Alexei's penthouse, a sprawling space of glass and steel and spectacular views. He gave her the tour, his hand never leaving hers, and when they finally stopped in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, he pulled her close. "I want you to move in with me," he said. "Not because it's practical or safe, though it's both, but because I don't want to spend another night without you under my roof. Because I wake up thinking about you and fall asleep the same way. Because you've become the most important thing in my world, and I want that world to be ours." Sarah should have hesitated, should have said it was too fast, too much. But she'd spent too long being careful, being small, being afraid. "Okay," she said. "Yes." Alexei's smile was blinding. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands spanning her waist, and Sarah felt the last pieces of her broken heart slot back into place, stronger than before. The next few months were a revelation. Sarah moved into the penthouse and discovered what it meant to be cherished. Alexei left her notes in the morning when he had early meetings, brought her coffee in bed on lazy Sundays, sat with her on the couch while she graded the kids' assignments from the community center, his hand absently stroking her hair. She met his inner circle. Victor, who'd become a friend in his own right. Dmitri, the scary one who turned out to be a total softy around children. Mikhail, who managed the legitimate businesses and treated Sarah with courtly respect. They accepted her not because Alexei ordered it, but because they saw what she meant to him. She also learned more about his world, the negotiations with other families, the careful balance between legal and illegal enterprises, the violence that sometimes came to their door that Alexei always kept away from her. There were hard moments. The first time she saw him come home with bruised knuckles and blood on his shirt that wasn't his. The night federal agents showed up asking questions, and she realized exactly how precarious his freedom was. The morning she overheard him on the phone, making the kind of threats that reminded her he was dangerous. But there were more good moments. So many more. The way he'd pull her into his lap while working and just hold her. How he'd stop everything when she needed to talk, giving her his complete attention. The night he took her to the ballet and whispered commentary that had her stifling laughter through the entire performance. 6 months after that first kiss, Sarah came home from the community center to find the penthouse transformed. Candles everywhere. Rose petals. A path leading to the balcony where Alexei stood in a suit that made her mouth go dry. "What's all this?" she asked, her heart already racing. "Come here." She followed the path to the balcony, where the city glittered below them like stars had fallen to earth. Alexei took her hands, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. "Sarah Mitchell, you are the most unexpected, most precious thing that's ever happened to me. You walked into my life by accident and changed everything. You make me want to be better, do better. You make me believe that maybe I'm not beyond redemption. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life." He sank down onto one knee, and Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. "I know my world is complicated. I know I'm not the safe choice or the easy choice, but I'm the man who loves you more than his next breath. I'm the man who will spend every day for the rest of his life, making sure you never regret that wrong number. Marry me, Sarah. Be my wife. Let me spend forever proving I'm worthy of you." The ring he pulled from his pocket was stunning. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the light and threw it back in brilliant sparks. But Sarah barely saw it. She was too busy looking at this powerful, dangerous, wonderful man kneeling before her like she was the one with all the power. "You're already worthy," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You've always been worthy. Yes, Alexei. Yes. I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, sweeping her into his arms and kissing her like he was trying to pour every ounce of love in his soul into her. Sarah kissed him back just as fiercely, this man who'd saved her in every way a person could be saved. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you more," he murmured. "And you never have to be terrified again. I've got you. Always." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the penthouse, surrounded by the family Alexei had built, and the few members of Sarah's family brave enough to attend. Her mother cried through the entire ceremony, but she'd hugged Alexei afterward and whispered, "Thank you for giving me my daughter back." The reception was another matter entirely. Alexei had rented out the most exclusive venue in the city, and it seemed like everyone who was anyone had shown up to pay their respects. Rival family heads, politicians, businessmen both legitimate and otherwise. All of them bending the knee, in their own ways, to the woman who'd claimed Alexei Volkov's heart. Sarah stood beside her husband, her hand in his, wearing a dress that made her feel like a princess, and marveled at her life. A year ago, she'd been huddled in a bathroom, broken and terrified, texting what she thought was her mother's number. Instead, she'd texted her future. Alexei leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Happy, Mrs. Volkov?" She looked up at him, at those storm-gray eyes that had seen into her soul from the first moment, and decided she was worth saving. Deliriously. "Good," he kissed her temple, "because this is just the beginning." And it was. Sarah continued working at the community center, watching it expand under Alexei's funding into something that served hundreds of kids across the city. She finished her teaching degree, going to classes part-time, while Alexei sat beside her at the kitchen table, working on his own projects, keeping her company during late-night study sessions. She learned to navigate his world with grace. Learned which families could be trusted, and which required careful handling. Learned that sometimes the wife of a man like Alexei Volkov held power of her own, and she wasn't afraid to use it for the kids who needed her, for the women who showed up at the community center with bruises they tried to hide, for the causes Alexei supported because she asked. But mostly she learned what it felt like to be loved completely, to wake up safe, to go to sleep cherished, to live without fear. On their first anniversary, Alexei took her back to the spot where he'd proposed. The balcony was decorated again, but simpler this time. Just them and the city, and the love that had grown even stronger. "I've been thinking," he said, pulling her close, "about that wrong number." "What about it?" "I don't think it was wrong at all. I think it was the most right thing that ever happened to either of us." Sarah thought about that night. The terror, the pain, the desperate prayer typed into a phone with shaking fingers. She thought about everything that had come after. The healing, the love, the life she'd built with this complicated, wonderful man. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said. "I was trying to text my mom, but you became the person who actually saved me." Alexei's smile was soft, his hand coming up to cup her face. "We saved each other, Lyubov Moya. That's what we do." He kissed her as the city sparkled below them, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and built something beautiful from the broken pieces. Sarah Mitchell had texted the wrong number, but she'd found exactly the right person, and in the end, that made all the difference. Sarah was stepping out of the community center on a Tuesday evening, her arms full of construction paper and art supplies, when she heard the screech of tires. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up, muscle memory from that night with Derek sending her stumbling backward toward the building's entrance. But the black sedan that pulled up wasn't Derek. It was worse. 3 men got out, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that said military training or worse. They weren't Alexei's people. Sarah knew all of Alexei's people by now, knew their faces, their walks, the way they held themselves. These men were strangers, and the way the lead one looked at her made ice water replace the blood in her veins. "Mrs. Volkov," he said, his accent thick and unfamiliar. "You will come with us." "Please." It wasn't a question. Sarah's hand dove into her purse, fingers closing around her phone. Alexei had made her practice this 100 times. Speed dial 1. Don't talk, just press it and leave the line open. The security team would trace it, would come running. She hit the button and heard it start to ring just as the man's expression hardened. "I said please, but this is not negotiable." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Sarah said, proud that her voice barely shook. "I don't know who you are, but you're making a very big mistake." The man smiled, and it was the smile of a shark. "No mistake. We know exactly who you are. The beloved wife of Alexei Volkov. The woman who made the dragon go soft. He will give us anything we ask for, to get you back unharmed." Dragon. She'd heard Alexei called that before, usually by people who were afraid of him. These men weren't afraid. They should have been. "My husband is going to kill you for this," Sarah said quietly. "Your husband is going to pay us $5 million and control of the shipping routes through the Northern District, or you die. Very simple business transaction." One of the other men moved toward her, and Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She screamed. Not a short scream, not a yelp. A full-throated, sustained shriek that echoed off the buildings and sent pedestrians across the street scrambling for their phones. The man lunged for her, but Sarah was already moving, throwing her armful of supplies at him and bolting back toward the community center door. She almost made it. Rough hands grabbed her from behind, lifting her off her feet. Sarah fought like a wildcat, kicking and thrashing and screaming. Her elbow connected with something that made a man grunt in pain. Her heel slammed down on an instep, and someone swore in a language she didn't understand. Then something pressed against her neck, and the world started to blur at the edges. "Not this," she thought desperately. "Not again. I'm not going back to being helpless. Not ever again." But her body had other ideas. The drug or chemical or whatever they'd used was pulling her down into darkness, and the last thing Sarah heard before unconsciousness took her was the beautiful sound of Victor's voice shouting her name. She woke up in darkness so complete she thought at first that she'd gone blind. Panic clawed at her throat as she tried to move, only to find her wrists zip-tied behind her back, her ankles bound to the legs of a metal chair. The air smelled like mildew and oil, and somewhere in the distance she could hear water dripping. "She is awake," a voice said from the darkness. A light clicked on, blinding after the pitch black. Sarah squinted against it, trying to make out the shapes around her. She was in some kind of warehouse, empty, except for the chair she was tied to and a folding table where 3 men sat playing cards. The one who'd done the talking outside was watching her, his cards held loosely in one hand. "Welcome back, Mrs. Volkov. You fight harder than expected. Dmitri has a broken nose because of you." One of the other men, presumably Dmitri, glared at her with murder in his eyes and a spectacular amount of blood on his shirt. "Good," Sarah said. "I hope it hurts." The leader laughed. "You have spirit. I see why he chose you." "But spirit will not help you now. You are here until your husband pays what we ask." "He'll pay it," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "And then he'll hunt down every single one of you and make you wish you'd never been born. Perhaps. But we will be in another country by then, living like kings on his money." Sarah tested the zip ties holding her wrists. Tight, but not impossible. Alexei had taught her this too, during one of their lazy Sunday mornings when she'd asked him to show her self-defense. How to break zip ties if you were strong enough and desperate enough. You had to raise your arms up and bring them down hard, elbows out, using your body's strength against the plastic. But she'd need the right moment. She'd need them distracted. "Can I at least have some water?" she asked. "Whatever you gave me. It made me sick." The leader considered this, then nodded to one of the other men. "Give her water. We are not animals." The man approached with a bottle and held it to her lips. Sarah drank, buying time, thinking. There were 3 of them and 1 of her. Even if she got free of the zip ties, the odds weren't good. But she'd learned something important in the year since that night in the bathroom. She'd learned that she was stronger than she knew, braver than she'd ever given herself credit for, and absolutely unwilling to be a victim ever again. The man stepped back and Sarah slumped in the chair, playing up the sick act. She let her head hang forward, her breathing deliberately shallow. She heard one of them say something in Russian, heard the scrape of chairs as they went back to their card game. She waited, counted to 100. Then raised her bound wrists as high as she could and slammed them down with every ounce of strength she possessed. The zip tie snapped. The sound was small, but in the echoing warehouse, it might as well have been a gunshot. All 3 men's heads whipped toward her, cards forgotten. Sarah was already moving, her hands going to the zip tie around her ankles. It was tighter, wouldn't break the same way, but she was working at it frantically as the men jumped to their feet. "Stop her!" Sarah got one ankle free just as hands grabbed her shoulders. She twisted, using the momentum to swing the chair she was still partially attached to, and the metal legs connected with someone's knee with a sickening crunch. The man went down screaming. 2 left. The leader pulled a gun from his waistband, and Sarah froze, her breath coming in ragged gasps, still tangled with the chair. This was it. She'd fought, and it hadn't been enough, and now she was going to die in a warehouse, while Alexei probably tore the city apart looking for her. "Stupid woman," the leader said, advancing on her. "You should have stayed still. Now I have to hurt you before we make the call to your husband, so he knows we are serious." The warehouse door exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. The metal shrieked as it was torn off its hinges by what looked like a small battering ram. Men in tactical gear poured through the opening, moving with the kind of lethal efficiency that said this was not their first rescue operation. But it was Alexei Sarah saw first. Alexei still in his work suit, his face a mask of cold fury that made him look like an avenging angel. His eyes swept the warehouse and landed on her. And for just a second the mask cracked. She saw relief so profound it made her chest ache, followed immediately by rage, unlike anything she'd ever witnessed. The leader made the mistake of turning his gun toward the door. He didn't even get a shot off. Victor was on him in a heartbeat, disarming him with brutal efficiency before slamming him face first into the concrete floor. The other conscious kidnapper tried to run, and made it maybe 3 steps before Dmitri tackled him like a linebacker. Then Alexei was in front of her, dropping to his knees, his hands incredibly gentle as they worked to free her from the remaining zip tie. "Are you hurt?" His voice was steady, but Sarah could see his hands shaking. "Sarah, Lyubov Moya, talk to me. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," she managed, and then she was in his arms. The chair clattering away forgotten. He held her so tight she could barely breathe, but she didn't care. She just buried her face in his neck and let herself shake. "I got one ankle free. I was trying to escape." She felt him take a shuddering breath against her hair. "Of course you were. My fierce, brave girl. Of course you were." Victor appeared beside them. "Alexei, we need to move. Police will have heard the noise." "Let them come," Alexei said, not loosening his grip on Sarah. "I don't care." "You do care. We all do. Come on, boss. We'll take her home. Make sure she's safe. Then we'll handle these mudaki properly." Alexei finally, reluctantly, pulled back enough to look at Sarah's face. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. "Can you walk?" "Yes." He stood, bringing her with him, and then simply swept her into his arms like she weighed nothing. Sarah wanted to protest that she could walk, she'd said so, but the truth was her legs felt like water, and being carried by her husband while his security team surrounded them felt exactly right. The drive back to the penthouse was silent except for the sound of Alexei on the phone, his voice cold and clipped as he issued orders in Russian. Sarah sat pressed against his side, his arm locked around her, and tried not to think about what would have happened if she hadn't hit that speed dial, if Victor hadn't heard her scream, if they'd been 5 minutes slower. Dr. Petrov was waiting at the penthouse when they arrived, his medical bag already open. He examined Sarah with his usual thoroughness, while Alexei paced like a caged animal, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "Bruising on her wrists and ankles from the restraints," Dr. Petrov announced. "Some muscle strain from fighting. Residual effects from whatever sedative they used, but nothing permanent. She needs rest and fluids. No lasting damage." "No lasting damage," Alexei repeated hollowly. "They drugged her, tied her up, planned to ransom her." "But they didn't succeed," Sarah said quietly. "Because of you. Because you taught me to hit that speed dial without thinking. Because Victor got there in time." Alexei crossed to her and knelt in front of where she sat on the couch, taking her hands carefully in his. "I should have protected you better. Should have assigned security to follow you everywhere, not just to and from work. I would have hated that. I don't care. If it keeps you safe, I don't care if you hate it. Alexei." Sarah waited until he looked at her, really looked at her. "I'm okay. I fought back. I got myself partially free. I'm not that scared woman in the bathroom anymore. You helped me become someone stronger." His eyes were suspiciously bright. "You were always strong. I just helped you remember it." Dr. Petrov cleared his throat diplomatically. "I'll leave medication for the muscle strain and instructions for care. Call me if anything changes." He let himself out, and suddenly Sarah and Alexei were alone. "Who were they?" Sarah asked. Alexei's expression hardened. "The Kozlov brothers. Small-time operators from Brighton Beach who got ambitious, thought they could make a name for themselves by taking something from me. They said you'd go soft, that I made you weak. They were wrong." "You don't make me weak, you make me absolutely ruthless. Because now I have something worth burning the world down to protect." The way he said it should have frightened her. Instead, Sarah felt warmth bloom in her chest. "What are you going to do to them?" "What I should have done months ago when they first started making noise about expanding into my territory. I was trying to be diplomatic, to avoid bloodshed." His smile was sharp and cold. "I'm done being diplomatic." Sarah knew she should probably tell him to be careful, to not do anything he'd regret. But she thought about those men's hands on her, the casual way they'd discussed ransoming her, and found she had no sympathy to spare. "Good," she said. Alexei studied her face. "You're not afraid of me. What I am. What I do. Should I be? Some would say yes. Those people don't know you like I do." Sarah reached out and cupped his face, feeling the tension thrumming through him. "I know you're dangerous. I've always known. But you've never been dangerous to me. You've only ever kept me safe. And I failed today. You saved me today. Again. Just like you've been saving me since the night I sent that wrong number text." She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and slow, trying to pour all her love and trust and faith into the connection. "I'm not afraid of you, Alexei Volkov. I'm not afraid of your world anymore either. I'm exactly where I belong." He kissed her back with a kind of desperate intensity, his hands gentle despite the violence she knew was coming for the men who'd taken her. When they finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he said roughly. "More than power, more than money, more than my own life. You're everything. I love you too. Now go do what you need to do. I'll be here when you get back." He left an hour later, after making sure she'd eaten and taken the medication Dr. Petrov had left. Victor stayed with her, along with 2 other guards posted at the door. Sarah should have felt trapped, but instead she felt safe. She fell asleep on the couch and woke to Alexei sliding in behind her, pulling her against his chest. His clothes smelled like smoke and his knuckles were bruised, but his touch was gentle as always. "It's done," he said quietly. "The Kozlov brothers won't trouble anyone again, and I sent a message to every family in the city. You are untouchable, mine to protect. Anyone who even thinks about harming you will answer to me." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. Do I want to know the details? Probably not. Then I won't ask. She traced the bruises on his knuckles. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't wrap me in bubble wrap and hide me away. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I won't live in a cage, even a gilded one. I need to keep working at the community center, keep living my life, keep being me. Alexei was quiet for a long moment. I'll assign security. Discreet, but present. Non-negotiable. I can live with that. And you take self-defense training seriously. Real training. From professionals. Also acceptable. And you promise me that if you ever feel unsafe, even for a second, you'll call me. Day or night. Meeting or no meeting, you're always the priority. Sarah smiled. I promise. But Alexei, you have to promise me something too. What? That you'll remember I chose this life. I chose you. I'm not some fragile thing that's going to break the first time something goes wrong. I'm your partner, your equal, your wife. Trust me to be strong enough to handle your world. He looked at her for a long time, those storm-gray eyes searching her face. Then he smiled, a real smile that lit up his whole face. You broke free of zip ties and gave one of them a broken nose. Broken knee, actually. Dmitri got the broken nose. My mistake, broken knee. His smile widened. You're magnificent, you know that? I learned from the best. They lay there together as dawn started to paint the sky outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and built something unbreakable from the broken pieces. Sarah had been taken, had fought back, had been saved. But more than that, she'd proven to herself and to everyone watching that she wasn't just Alexei Volkov's wife. She was Sarah Volkov, a woman who'd survived hell and come out stronger, who'd built a life she loved, who stood beside one of the most powerful men in the city as his equal. The wrong number that had saved her life had given her so much more than safety. It had given her a partner, a purpose, and the courage to become who she was always meant to be. And as Alexei held her close and whispered promises of forever against her hair, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged.